I found my son cleaning bathrooms on his first day at his father-in-law's company. He was on his knees, yellow gloves up to his elbows, scrubbing a toilet so hard his shoulders shook. His new suit, navy blue, tailored, still smelling faintly of the store, hung untouched on the hook behind the door. Standing in the doorway, laughing like it was the funniest thing he'd seen all week, was his father-in-law. "That's all he knows how to do," he said to the men beside him. 4 years of college. Business degree. And he ends up right where he belongs. I didn't say a word. I felt something hot and dangerous rise in my chest, the kind of rage that makes your hands shake. I swallowed it down, nodded once, and walked away. In the elevator, my reflection looked older than I remembered. Outside, I sat in my truck until my breathing slowed. Then I made a phone call. 3 weeks later, they were screaming in horror at what I did. This isn't a story about revenge. This is a story about the price of dignity. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from? And what time is it right now? I want to know how far a father's fight for dignity can travel. That morning had started quietly. The kitchen smelled like coffee and toast, the same way it had for years. I stood at the counter spreading butter while my son, Daniel, adjusted his tie for the 10th time. It was a gift from his wife, Claire, silk, expensive, the kind of thing I never bought for myself. "You're going to be great," I said, trying to sound confident enough for both of us. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's a big place, Dad. Harding Industries. Claire's dad built it from nothing." "So did I said lightly. "Just a different kind of nothing." He laughed, a nervous little sound. "I just don't want to mess this up." I set his plate in front of him. "You didn't get where you are by accident. Remember that." He nodded, chewing without tasting. I could see the doubt sitting behind his eyes, the same doubt he'd carried since he was a boy, brilliant, hard-working, always worried he wasn't enough. His mother would have known exactly what to say. She'd been gone 5 years now, but I still caught myself glancing toward the hallway like she might walk in any second. "She'd be proud of you," I said quietly. His throat tightened. "I wish she were here." "She is," I said, tapping my chest. "Right here." We ate in silence after that, the comfortable kind that comes from years of being each other's only family. When he stood to leave, I followed him to the door. He hesitated, then turned back. "Thanks, Dad. For everything. For working all those extra hours. For believing in me." I gripped his shoulder. "That's what fathers do. Now go. Don't be late on your first day." He grinned, grabbed his briefcase, and was gone. I stood on the porch long after his car disappeared, a strange heaviness settling in my stomach. I tried to ignore it. I washed the dishes, changed clothes, went over invoices for my small contracting business. But the feeling wouldn't leave. It sat there, stubborn and cold. By late morning, I couldn't stand it anymore. I told myself I was just being overprotective, but I grabbed my keys anyway. I'd drop by Harding Industries, maybe bring Daniel lunch. Nothing wrong with that. The building downtown was all glass and steel, the kind of place that made my work truck look like it didn't belong. Inside, the lobby was marble and cold air. A young woman at the reception desk smiled when she saw me. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I'm looking for my son, Daniel Harris. He started today." Her smile faltered. Something flickered across her face, pity, maybe fear. She glanced toward the elevators, then back at me. "Let me check," she said, already standing. "You might want to wait here." The stone in my chest hardened. "I'll find him." She reached out as if to stop me, but I was already moving. Behind me, I heard her pick up the phone, her voice low and urgent. The elevator ride felt too long. When the doors opened, I followed the signs toward a maintenance corridor. I heard laughter before I saw anything, men's voices, careless and cruel. I rounded the corner and stopped. The door to the bathroom was half open. Inside, my son was on his knees. Yellow gloves. Scrub brush. His shoulders hunched, his back curved inward like he was trying to disappear. His suit jacket hung untouched behind him. Standing over him was his father-in-law, Richard Harding, silver hair, expensive suit, the posture of a man used to being obeyed. Two other executives stood nearby, smirking. "This is the only job he's fit for," Richard said. "Can't even clean a toilet right." They laughed. Then I saw Claire. She stood off to the side, arms crossed. She wasn't laughing, but she wasn't stopping it either. The faint smile on her lips made my stomach drop. Daniel looked up. Our eyes met. The shame in his face hit me harder than any punch. His eyes were red. He'd been crying. He tried to mouth something, maybe don't, but I already knew. Something inside me cracked clean through. "Can I help you?" Richard said, annoyed, turning toward me. "I'm his father," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Daniel. Get up." "He's not finished," Richard snapped. "He's on company time." Every muscle in my body screamed to move, to do something I couldn't take back. But Daniel shook his head, just a fraction. I forced my hands to unclench. "We'll talk later, son," I said softly. Then I looked at Richard. "You and I will talk too." He waved me off. "I'm busy." "You'll make time." I turned and walked away before I did something that would ruin everything. The elevator doors closed, trapping me with my reflection. I pressed my palms against the cold metal and closed my eyes. Outside, the sun felt wrong. I sat in my truck, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing through the anger. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed. "Mark," I said when he answered. "I need you to look into someone for me. Richard Harding. Everything you can find." There was a pause. "How deep?" "As deep as it goes. Give me a day." I drove home in silence. The house felt emptier than usual. I paced the kitchen, my eyes landing on the photos along the wall, Daniel at his graduation, his mother holding him as a baby. 30 years of sacrifice, of late nights and early mornings, all to see my son humiliated like that. By that night, I'd made my decision. Daniel came home late, shoulders slumped, the smell of cleaning chemicals clinging to his clothes. When he saw me waiting, his face crumpled. He tried to apologize, but the words dissolved into tears. I pulled him into my arms. "It's not your fault," I said over and over. "None of this is your fault." When he finally calmed, we sat on the couch. "They say it's temporary," he said quietly. 6 weeks. Then I'll get a real position. If I prove myself." I nodded, filing the number away. "Can you hold on a little longer?" He looked at me, confused. "Why?" "Just trust me." Something in my voice must have convinced him. He nodded. The next morning, my phone rang early. "Harding Industries is drowning," Mark said without preamble. "Debt. Bad investments. Over-leveraged properties. If they don't get a cash infusion soon, they're done." I stared out the window at the sunrise. "How much to buy control?" 7, maybe 8 million. "I have it." Silence. "You're serious?" "Money grows back," I said. "Dignity doesn't." Over the next 3 weeks, I watched my son endure hell while I worked quietly. Week 1, they made him redo the same bathroom over and over for imaginary mistakes. Week 2, he ate lunch alone until an older maintenance worker sat beside him and told him not to let them break him. Week 3, Richard paraded him in front of clients like a joke. At home, Claire told him it was all part of the process. Dad knows what he's doing. While Daniel suffered, I moved. I liquidated investments, signed papers, set up a holding company through Mark and a few trusted associates. Richard couldn't know it was me, not yet. On Friday night of the 3rd week, Daniel called. His voice was thin. "There's a big meeting Monday," he said. "They want me to serve coffee." I closed my eyes. Just a little longer, I said. I promise. After we hung up, I stared at my wife's photo. I'm doing this for him, I whispered. Monday morning, the offer landed on Richard's desk. By Thursday, the meeting was set. I listened from the adjoining room as Richard argued, pleaded, and finally signed. When I stepped into the conference room and introduced myself, his face drained of color. You, he whispered. Yes, I said calmly. Me. He asked why. I told him the truth. About my son. About dignity. About the cost of cruelty. By the end, he was a consultant with no power, and Daniel was the new CEO. When I told my son, he sat in stunned silence. You spent everything, he said. Not everything, I replied. I kept what matters. 6 months later, the company was profitable again, renamed, rebuilt, run with respect. Daniel led with quiet strength. The maintenance worker who'd shown him kindness was promoted. Wages were fair. People smiled more. Claire left. She said she needed someone stronger. Daniel didn't argue. On Sundays, he comes over for breakfast. We drink coffee and talk about work, about life. Sometimes we sit in silence. I don't regret a single dollar I spent. Because money grows back. Dignity doesn't. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that bathroom. About the sound of laughter echoing off tile walls. About how close I came to doing something stupid, something violent, something that would have destroyed everything I'd spent my life building. Anger is loud. Justice is quiet. I learned that difference the hard way. Daniel never talks about those 3 weeks unless someone else brings them up. When employees thank him for changing the culture, he just nods and says, "It's how it should have been all along." But I see it in the way he stops to talk to the janitorial staff, in the way he asks new hires about their families, in the way he never raises his voice. He learned leadership on his knees, and it made him unbreakable. One afternoon, months after the takeover, I ran into Richard Harding at a grocery store. He was pushing a cart with one wheel that wouldn't turn right, wearing a jacket that had seen better years. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked small. Our eyes met for a brief second. I nodded once. He looked away. I felt nothing. No victory. No bitterness. Just an ending. People ask me if I'd do it again. If I'd risk everything I earned for one moment of justice. I always give the same answer. I didn't risk it. I invested it. In my son. In his future. In the kind of man he'd become. The world teaches our children to endure humiliation quietly, to be grateful for scraps, to confuse suffering with character. I believed that for too long. I told myself patience was strength. What I didn't understand was that patience without dignity is just surrender. Daniel could have stayed. He could have scrubbed toilets and swallowed his pride until someone decided he was worthy. Instead, he chose to walk away. That single choice saved him. Everything that followed was just consequence. On Sunday mornings now, the kitchen smells like coffee and bacon again. Daniel sits at the table, relaxed, confident, talking about projects that actually matter. Sometimes he catches me watching him and smiles. What? He asks. Nothing, I say. Just proud. He doesn't know this, but every time I see that smile, I hear his mother's voice in my head, telling me we did okay. That our boy turned out right. If you're listening to this and you're on your knees somewhere, at work, in a relationship, in a place where your worth is being laughed at, hear me clearly. You don't earn dignity by suffering long enough. You claim it by knowing when to walk away. And if you're a parent watching someone you love be crushed, don't wait as long as I did. Trust your instincts. Love isn't passive. Love acts. Money comes and goes. Titles change. Buildings get sold. But dignity, once lost, is hard to recover. Protect it. What would you have done differently if you were in my place? There's one more thing I haven't told many people. A year after everything settled, Daniel asked me to meet him at the old job site where I'd started my contracting business decades earlier. It was nothing special, an empty lot near the river, weeds pushing through cracked concrete, the ghost of a half-finished foundation I'd never had the money to complete back then. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, looking nervous in a way I hadn't seen since his first day of school. "I bought this," he said finally. I frowned. "Why?" He smiled, slow and sure. "Because this is where you taught me how to work. Not with words. With your hands. With how you treated people." He told me his plan, to build affordable homes there. Not luxury condos. Not glass towers. Homes regular people could afford. The kind of place where no one would ever be told they belonged on their knees. "I want this company to mean something," he said. "Not just to make money." I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. That night, I went home and pulled out an old notebook. Inside were lists I'd made over the years, jobs I wanted to bid on, tools I needed, dreams I'd told myself were unrealistic. On the last page, written in my wife's handwriting, was a sentence she'd left me before she got sick. "Raise him kind. The rest will follow." I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that, thinking about how close I'd come to failing her. How easy it is to mistake silence for wisdom, endurance for virtue. The world will always have people like Richard Harding. People who confuse cruelty with strength. They build tall towers, but the foundations are hollow. When they fall, it feels sudden, but it never is. What's rare are people who choose dignity when no one is watching. Who walk away from humiliation even when it costs them everything. Those people don't always look powerful. Sometimes they're on their knees, wearing yellow gloves, scrubbing someone else's mess. But they're the ones who last. If this story found you at the right moment, if it reminded you of something you've been carrying quietly, I hope you remember this. You are not what someone else reduces you to. You are not the job they mock. You are not the role they force on you. Your worth isn't proven by how much you can endure. It's proven by what you refuse to accept. I learned that late in life. My son learned it just in time. And if you take nothing else from this story, take this with you. Money grows back. Power shifts. But dignity, once you claim it, changes everything. Years pass faster than you expect once you stop chasing the wrong things. Daniel is older now, steadier. The sharp edges that those 3 weeks carved into him didn't disappear, they settled into something solid. Resolve. When people challenge him, he listens. When they disrespect others, he corrects them once. Calmly. Public humiliation never happens on his watch. Sometimes new hires don't even recognize me when I stop by the office. I like it that way. I sit in the back during meetings, listening. Not to the numbers, but to the tone. Respect has a sound. You can hear it when it's real. Every once in a while, someone will say, "You're lucky. Your father saved you." Daniel always corrects them. "No," he says. "He reminded me who I was. I did the rest." That's when I know he truly understood. I never told him how close I came to storming that bathroom. How close I was to letting anger make the decision instead of love. Violence feels powerful in the moment, but it leaves nothing standing afterward. What I did took longer. It hurt more. And it worked. On quiet evenings, I sit on the porch and think about the man I used to be. The one who believed keeping your head down was always the right answer. The one who thought endurance alone was noble. I don't judge that man. He was doing his best with what he knew. But I wouldn't listen to him anymore. Because here's the truth most people never hear until it's too late. There are situations where staying is not strength. There are moments where silence is not wisdom. And there are lines that, once crossed, must be answered not with rage, but with action. Daniel crossed the line the day he stood up, dropped the uniform, and walked out. That single step changed everything. The money, the company, the fallout, all of that came later. The real victory happened in the parking lot, with shaking hands and a phone call that said, "Dad, I quit." That was dignity choosing itself. If you're still listening, maybe it's because part of this story feels familiar. Maybe you've been telling yourself, just a little longer. Maybe you've been waiting for someone else to notice, to step in, to save you. Don't wait. No job, no relationship, no promise of future success is worth the slow erosion of who you are. The world will always try to convince you that humiliation is temporary and obedience will be rewarded. Sometimes it is. Often, it isn't. What lasts is what you protect. I didn't raise my son to be rich. I raised him to be decent. Everything else was negotiable. So if you remember anything from this story, remember this. When someone laughs at your dignity, they're telling you exactly who they are. When you choose not to accept it, you're deciding who you will become. And that choice, quiet, terrifying, irreversible, is the most powerful thing you'll ever make. I used to think stories like this needed a villain to lose and a hero to win. Now I know better. The real ending doesn't happen in boardrooms or courtrooms. It happens quietly, long after everyone stops watching. It happens the first time Daniel walks into a room and doesn't feel smaller than anyone else inside it. It happens when an employee speaks up without fear and isn't punished for it. It happens when Sunday mornings feel peaceful instead of heavy. A few months ago, Daniel asked me something while we were fixing a loose cabinet hinge in my kitchen. My hands aren't as steady as they used to be, but habits die hard. "Dad," he said, not looking at me, "did you ever feel like you failed me?" The question caught me off guard. I worried about it, I said honestly. "Every day." He nodded. "I think I understand now. You didn't fail me. You just let me face something you hoped I never would." We worked in silence for a moment. Then he added, "I'm glad you didn't fight for me that day. Not the way you wanted to." I looked up at him. "If you had," he continued, "this would have been your story. Not mine." That's when it finally settled in my chest. The greatest thing I gave my son wasn't money. It wasn't a company. It wasn't even justice. It was the chance to choose himself. That's a hard thing for a parent to accept. We want to fix. We want to shield. We want to step in before the pain becomes permanent. But some lessons only take root when someone stands up on their own trembling legs and says, "Enough." Daniel did that. Everything else, the deal, the downfall, the transformation, was just the echo of that moment. I don't tell this story to make anyone angry. I tell it so someone out there realizes they're not crazy for feeling humiliated. That their discomfort is valid. That dignity isn't a luxury reserved for the powerful, it's a boundary every human being is allowed to draw. If you're still listening, maybe this isn't about my son at all. Maybe it's about you. Maybe you're scrubbing someone else's mess while they laugh. Maybe you're being told to wait your turn, prove yourself, earn basic respect. Maybe you're staying because you're afraid of what walking away would cost. I won't tell you what to do. I'll just tell you this. The moment you choose dignity, the world shifts. Not always immediately. Not always gently. But permanently. I learned that watching my son stand up when it mattered most. And every Sunday morning, when the coffee is hot and the kitchen is full of quiet laughter, I know we chose right. That's the real ending. That's the price of dignity. And it's worth everything. After that, I stopped waiting for closure. Because closure doesn't arrive like a final scene in a movie. It shows up in small moments you almost miss if you're not paying attention. Like the first time Daniel told me he turned down a lucrative deal because it would have meant laying off 50 workers. They made the numbers look good, he said, stirring his coffee. But it felt wrong. What did you do? I asked. He shrugged. I said no. There was no drama in his voice. No pride. Just certainty. That's when I realized the cycle had truly broken. Power hadn't changed him. It had revealed him. I've watched men my whole life who climb just high enough to forget where they came from. Who confuse authority with worth. who believe fear is the fastest way to obedience. Richard Harding was one of them. But he wasn't unique. He was common. Too common. What was rare was what came after. Daniel didn't replace cruelty with control. He replaced it with standards. Clear ones. If you worked hard, you were respected. If you made a mistake, you were taught, not humiliated. If you crossed a line, there were consequences, but never spectacle. No one was ever put on their knees again. One evening, long after the office lights were off, Daniel found something in his storage room that used to belong to maintenance. A box of old supplies. Inside it, folded neatly, was a pair of yellow rubber gloves. He stood there holding them for a long time before throwing them away. Not angrily. Gently. Like letting go of something that no longer had power over him. When people hear this story, some of them focus on the money. The deal. The shock. They want the dramatic part, the moment where everything flips. But that's not the part that matters. What matters is what didn't happen. Daniel didn't become bitter. He didn't become cruel. He didn't become obsessed with proving anything. He became free. And freedom, I've learned, is quieter than people expect. It looks like going to work without dread. It sounds like laughter that isn't forced. It feels like standing upright without thinking about it. If you're still here, still listening, maybe this story stayed with you because it touched something raw. Maybe you've been telling yourself that enduring humiliation is just part of the process. That one day it'll all make sense. Sometimes it does. Sometimes the lesson is simpler. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to protect your dignity even if no one applauds. I didn't understand that when I was younger. I taught my son to work hard, to be patient, to be grateful. What I forgot to teach him, what life ended up teaching him instead, was that respect is not a reward. It's a requirement. And if a place demands you abandon your self-respect to belong, then it was never your place to begin with. That's the truth I'll carry with me for the rest of my days. Not as a warning. Not as a threat. But as a quiet reminder. The moment you stop accepting humiliation, you stop being controllable. And that moment, even if it terrifies you, is the beginning of everything. I don't tell this story at gatherings anymore. Not because it's painful, but because people tend to misunderstand it. They hear the part about the company changing hands and think that's the point. They hear about the downfall and think it's a warning. It's neither. The real lesson is quieter. It's the way Daniel now pauses before answering questions, making sure his words don't diminish anyone else. It's the way he insists on learning names, really learning them. Not just executives, but custodians, interns, security guards. It's the way he says thank you like it matters, because to him, it does. Once, a young man in maintenance stopped me in the hallway. I was just visiting, killing time while Daniel finished a call. "Sir," he said, nervous. "I just wanted to say, this place feels different now." I nodded. "It should." He hesitated. "I've worked places where people like us were invisible." "You're not invisible here," I said. "Not anymore." He smiled, relief softening his face, and walked away. That moment meant more to me than any balance sheet. As for me, I slowed down. I stopped taking jobs that wore my body out for no good reason. I learned how to sit still without feeling guilty. Retirement isn't about stopping, it's about choosing what's worth your time. Every now and then, Daniel asks me for advice. Not about money or contracts. About people. Am I being fair, he asks. Did I listen enough? Did I miss something? I always tell him the same thing. If you're asking those questions, you're probably doing okay. On the anniversary of his first day at the company, he invited the entire staff to a simple lunch. No speeches. No banners. Just food, conversation, and a quiet acknowledgement that something had changed. When someone joked about how far he'd come, Daniel shook his head. I didn't climb, he said. I stood up. I watched the room absorb that. Some nodded. Some looked away. A few people smiled like they'd just been given permission to do the same. That night, back at home, I stood alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that no longer feels lonely. I ran my hand along the counter, worn smooth by decades of use. I thought about the man I was when I walked into that building. Angry. Afraid. Ready to break something just to make the pain stop. I'm glad I didn't. Because what I built instead lasted. If you stayed with this story until now, maybe it's because you're standing at a crossroads of your own. Maybe you're wondering how much you're supposed to endure before it counts as strength. Maybe you're afraid that choosing dignity will cost you too much. It will cost you something. But it will give you yourself back. And that is never a bad trade. That's where this story ends. Not with shouting. Not with applause. Just with a father, a son, and the quiet certainty that some things are worth protecting, no matter the price. I'll leave you with this. Years from now, no one will remember the exact numbers. They won't remember the size of the deal, the contracts signed, or the offices that changed hands. Buildings age. Companies rebrand. Money moves on. What endures is what people felt. They'll remember the first day they walked into work without fear. They'll remember the moment they realized respect wasn't something they had to earn through humiliation. They'll remember the man who chose dignity when it would have been easier to stay quiet. Daniel still keeps one thing from those days. Not the gloves. Not the uniform. He keeps the memory not as a wound, but as a compass. Whenever a decision gets hard, whenever pressure comes from above or temptation creeps in, he asks himself one question. Would I be proud to be watching this from my father's eyes? That question has never failed him. As for me, I don't need monuments or recognition. I don't need credit. My reward comes every Sunday morning when the kitchen fills with voices, when laughter replaces tension, when I see a man who knows his worth and refuses to trade it for comfort. If this story reached you at a moment when you needed it, then it did its job. Remember this, and carry it with you. No job is worth your dignity. No relationship is worth your self-respect. No promise of someday is worth being broken today. Stand up when it matters. Walk away when you must. And never let anyone convince you that humiliation is the price of opportunity. Because the truth is simple, even if it's hard to live by. Money grows back. Power shifts. But dignity, once you protect it, becomes the foundation everything else stands on. That's the real legacy a parent can leave behind. And that's the story I wanted to tell.